Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Enough to Keep Going podcast, your weekly gaming podcast. Gamers for Life, this is episode number 245. Well on the way to episode 250, quarter of a century, which is about as old as DBQ and I feel. So tonight, Summer Games Fest has kicked off, and so we've done this lap around the industry several times, a dozen times, I think we're pretty close to, and we have to do it yet once again. Although I think we're kind of in our, I don't want to call them our twilight years, but we're not beating the streets like Engadget and Gizmodo and chasing stuff like we used to do back in the day, where we had, you know, basically a Discord battle center set up so we could keep up with all the coverage, and we were constantly posting notes, etc. But we're going to get into it, and we're going to talk about a lot of the games that were put on display today, and start off with a focus on just what we've been playing, because that's become more and more of our focus than just the news cycle. So here with me tonight, I have my co-host, Mr. DBQ Hams. How you doing, DBQ?
I'm doing pretty well. You're right. This does feel, while it's not E3, we're not as intense about it as we have been in the past as well. So it seems we definitely had those years of tracking things actively, and now it's just keeping a Google Doc together as we're running through the show and the shows. But we should have a lot to talk about in the next week and two as the announcements trickle in over time.
Many spreadsheets have been slayed in pursuit of E3 and Summer Games Fest. Many spreadsheets. So let's start tonight off with the top of our new format for the next gen, our first bit on our own Gamers Experience, and we'll come back around and wrap up with the second part of that report out. DBQ Hams, why don't you talk to us first about the game that has been in heavy rotation with you?
Sure. I've been... what were you going to say?
No, go right ahead.
Yeah, I have been digging into the Wonder Boy collection. So this is Wonder Boy on Sega. It is, the original Wonder Boy started in arcades around the mid-'80s. It has a weird life cycle to it, because my first Wonder Boy experience was actually Hudson's Adventure Island on NES, which is basically Wonder Boy with just a reskin. And so the collection, the digital collection, is the original game in the arcade, the Wonder Boy in Monster Land arcade, and then Wonder Boy in Monster World from Genesis, and then Monster World 4 on Genesis as well. So that's the digital collection. Monster World 4 is actually a really strong game. It was recently remastered in 2017-18 as a 3D engine game, or a game with a 3D engine, not anyhow. But yeah, it is. So the standouts of these four really are the original, which is a hard action kind of scrolling arcade game, which still holds up nicely because it's pretty simple in its design. And then Monster World 4, which is almost more of a Metrovania aspect to it. Really nice sprite work and enjoyable kind of world to explore. Combat is relatively side scrolling slashy. Monster Land and Monster World really are almost the same game, and you really notice this playing them back to back, is that beat for beat the first level is almost the same, except for the fact that the original in the arcade had a time system that, because it was an arcade, right, you had to have some reason to have somebody put another quarter in, and you would get more time, more sand for your hourglass as you went through. And Monster Boy and Wonder Boy and Monster World for the Genesis is pretty much the same, just with some nice Genesis graphics. They don't hold up nearly as well as the refinement in the final one, and also the kind of simplistic original. So it's been kind of a fun trip down. As somebody who had a NES and an SNES, I didn't really have a lot of Wonder Boy experience, and so it was kind of fun to kind of dig into this corner of the world. But I do have to say that this is while it's enjoyable, it feels so limited to what the physical edition is. So this is where the shenanigans happen. The physical edition is only done by strictly limited games, and that you would, physical edition for Switch or PlayStation 4 is about $55 US, $50 UK, but it has 21 titles in it. So you go from paying $30 for the digital edition that has 4 titles to the $55 physical edition, which has 21. And there you get the SG-1000, you get Master System, you get arcade, you get the Game Gear variants, you get a lot more variants. It also has Wonder Boy, Dragon's Trap, and which came out, or remaster came out a couple years ago. Also Monster Lair. So you get the 2 other kind of mainline Monster World ones, Monster World 2 and 3, but then you get all the different versions, arcade, Genesis, you get this, even the Mark II. You get there's not drastic difference, but it really is a complete collection for $15 more. And so that's where it feels like, one, I'm not that committed to Wonder Boy that I would spend the $55, but I think if the digital collection was $20, it would feel a little more reasonable. Or if it had even just Monster World 2 and 3 in it to kind of round out and give it kind of the benchmarks, the key markers, of the series, and let the collector's edition be all the variants as well. So it feels really bare bones, and even it has the features that you would expect, like a rewind, like save states, but the gallery aspect is really just kind of still images, and the only kind of history you get out of it is a 1-paragraph kind of intro of the game's history, where I think about recent collections, even like the Disney cartoon collection with Lion King, Aladdin, and Jungle Book. You had videos of the making of those games. You had all kinds of kind of dev material in there as well. So it's pretty thin for comparable collections. And this is the point where you ask a question. Nope, you're still on mute. So
okay, that's weird. I don't know why So the Go XLR mixer, when I hit the mute button, the volume should go to max on the microphone, and for some reason it just like flipped polarities, and I hit the mute button and the mic volume stayed low. So I don't know, whatever. So I want to make sure that I understand. So you're saying that the digital version of this SKU, which is essentially being sold as two different SKUs, I should really say, is half the price of the physical, but you only get a quarter of the content.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. That's just a weird Sega
It's
flex.
a weird breakdown. Yeah. It really.
Because I mean, it's the publisher that drives that, right? I mean, Nintendo doesn't dictate the policy, I would assume.
No, because this is also on PlayStation. I mean,
Right.
it's out on multiple things. It's not Nintendo driving it. I really think. I mean, it is. I think it is trying to really bolster the collector's edition, and I guess it kind of makes sense in terms of if you're into this series, having a physical edition probably is something that you'd want anyways because you're that type of collector, but it also really kind of disincentivizes the picking it up like I did just to kind of explore.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on over here. So, do you know, is it that case across all platforms?
So it's only on Switch and PlayStation, and yes, it's the same. Yep.
Okay, so PlayStation lets you buy it digitally on the store for $30, and then the physical in GameStop or whatever is almost
The
60
physical is only
on Switch.
only from Strictly Limited, so it is only mail order.
Okay.
And it's both. It's PlayStation and Switch.
Okay.
Yeah. And then maybe this is why, this is part of Strictly Limited's negotiation to make it worthwhile for them to do physical runs of this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that. I mean, fond memories of Wonder Boy, because my first introduction to it was on the Sega Master System. Although in my memory, I always get Wonder Boy and Alex Kidd mixed up.
Yes, right. And Alex Kidd has just as convoluted of a history as well. But yes, they're not the same.
All right, well, cool, man. But you've been enjoying it. I mean, that's, I guess, one of my...
Yeah, I mean, I think, yes, I would say it's been, the first game and the fourth game hold up as good game experiences.
So you've recently been playing Kirby, just like Swiss was. Maybe not as extensively, but I mean, how does the platforming in 2D adventuring kind of compare? I mean, is it painfully remindful of like the advancement of like game design between those times and now?
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, it really is like this is a museum piece more than it is a modern experience. And it's worth. I mean, it's enjoyable. That's the same reason why I would have picked up the Genesis collection or some of the older collections of retro games, because it's nice to take a trip down memory lane, but not everything holds up the same.
Well, and that's really a good question. There is Sega content on the extended virtual console or whatever Nintendo calls it, right?
Yes. Yep. On the expansion pass, there is Genesis.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any Wonder Boy yet at this point.
Okay. I'm just curious why they wouldn't have, put it there. I mean, put the 4 titles there, right? And then...
yeah. And even, I mean, well, because in part, I suppose, because they're pulling the arcade version and there's not a Master System equivalent. Like you could get a couple of the Wonder Boys from Genesis, but not necessarily. And they have been repackaged in different ways. Like on the 360 and Xbox Arcade, there was a collection of Monster World that had some of those other games. I could also see the rationale of if you really wanted to play Dragon's Trap and Dragon's Lair, that there's the remake of those also is running the old game on top of it, so you could switch between graphic skins if you wanted. So there's other ways to play that, I guess, right? If you're going to pay another $20 for each of them, yeah.
Well, publishers and platform owners are making themselves famous this week for their money grubbing antics. So, this is just I don't think this is money grubbing. It's just a weird monetization scheme that we have to speculate on the reasoning for. So anything else about Wonder Boy?
No, the only other I did in lieu of what you're going to talk about, I did dive in and play a little bit of the campaign of Vanguard as well, just to kind of see a point of comparison. So I'm curious on your experience there. I don't know that you've spent a lot of time in it compared to your time in Halo and other things
I haven't
this year.
And I'm fine. Do you want to talk a little bit about the campaign at all?
It's a Call of Duty campaign. Okay. It looks really good on PlayStation 5 on a 4K TV, but it still feels like a Call of Duty campaign.
Okay, yeah. And that may be relevant when we talk about the Summer Game Fest today.
Yes. Yeah.
So I have not played the single player campaign, and so I have. I mean, I've been kind of telegraphing it for a while, but I just kind of firmly settled on the notion that I have firmly made this pivot into like competitive PvP. Not competitive. I mean, I'm not a League player or anything, but first-person shooter, PvP, online, live service, right, all that kind of stuff type of games. Like, it's a list of, like, 21 games that I'm kind of putting into my heavy rotation now with, still trying to maintain that rubric of, like, no more than 3, live battle passes at any one time. But I did decide to go ahead and mix in Vanguard because I realized I had been laying off Vanguard because of my feeling of it not being as good as Black Ops Cold War, which it isn't. But, just to put it in Metacritic terms, I mean, I really enjoyed Cold War. That game is a 76, Metacritic game, and Vanguard is a 72 Metacritic game. And I felt maybe I was being a little too persnickety about that 4-point delta. So I said, well, let me try it and I'll check it out. And so I started playing the multiplayer version of it. Again, I'm not a Warzone player. And it is not as good as Call of Duty Vanguard, but it is...
Call of Duty Cold War.
I'm sorry, Call of Duty Cold War. Yeah. Black Ops Cold War.
In terms of the fluidity, I mean,
there's parts of the mechanics that I'm not a huge fan of. It feels very kind of cartoony, kind of almost a little pointed in the Borderlands direction. Just in terms of the characters don't have that same kind of fortitude and corporealness that I feel like when I'm playing Call of Duty Bold War. Bold War. Jeez.
There's a little weightiness to Cold War.
Yes. Yeah. So whereas I feel like... this is like, there are some games out there that have been kind of World War II era that have kind of been, like I said, like pointed towards the end of the animation spectrum, right? That's just a little, doesn't have as, like you said, doesn't have as much weight as Cold War does. It's also kind of a slightly more difficult paradigm for me. Well, first of all, they've increased the sprawl of the progression system. So it's just... I mean, logically so, like they've taken gestures and moved them over to like the progression sub menu. So it's more of like a characterization of your online character than like your online skin and loadout. So it's a little separate and tucked in an area that kind of feels like it's about more persistent kind of settings of your character. And that's fine. But overall, I feel like they've increased the sprawl of, or they've gone back to kind of the Modern Warfare layout of UI, which actually I really don't like, just because it feels confusing and it doesn't compact things kind of within one single like scan of the UI, within my field of vision, like the Cold War did, just the way everything in Cold War was kind of vertically stacked. And the way all the attachments were vertically stacked, they're now laid out kind of horizontally. And so what it forces me to do is I can in Cold War, I can look at a vertical stack and I can count and I can say, okay, there are 8 attachments, right? There are 8 attachment spots. Whereas in the Vanguard UI, which again is like the Modern Warfare UI, I have to go all around, right, the UI, right, because they put the attachments where they're physically located on the weapon. And so it creates this, I got to do this 360 degree, like run a lap to go, okay, how many attachments are there? Like, where are they? What are the ones that are pertinent? And it's just not as neat and tidy as the Cold War UI was to me. They've made some changes that I like in terms of, now there's, I would call it like a match size bias that you can set or affinity that you can set. with tactical versus, I can't remember what the other one's called, but basically.
Oh, I remember that when it came out. Yeah, that
Yeah.
there was ways to kind of. It wasn't necessarily the change the kind of the rules of engagement, but it did kind of change the size and yeah.
Right. So free for all will now, if you put it on tactical, will be 8 people. But then whatever the other setting is, it'll like expand it to like 10 or 12 or something like that. The thing that bugs me is what I've seen is it doesn't necessarily change the maps that are in random rotation. And I'm kind of like, so sometimes you get like an 8-person match on this really wide sprawling map, which just limits the numbers of encounters. I sometimes see that like the big firefights kind of degenerate into kind of one pocketed area of the map. In some ways it's kind of helpful because it allows you to do that map familiarity, because you can move around larger sections of the map without being so concerned that there's a person around every corner. One of the things though is when you set it on the larger size bias, the problem is you get like larger numbers of people on really small maps, and you get this thing. I don't know if it's people cheating, but like it's really strange to me that like every time I make a kill, there's always somebody like right behind me. Like that's just a strange pattern of movement that like doesn't seem like it should be that deterministic, but that could be caused by map size. So they have some smaller maps. Again, I'm still kind of playing with graphic settings, and maybe I just don't have the graphic settings wired right, particularly with brightness and other things. So that's, I'm still trying to figure that out. I should mention, and so the GPU problems that I've been having of late on one system of mine that there's one system of mine that still has a Radeon card in it. It has a current 6000 series. It's a RX 6700 XT. It had exhibited some bad behaviors. I had pulled the card, heard a loose screw tinkle down onto the motherboard that I had dropped in the case previously, and that I thought I couldn't get it to drop out, but I thought I had gotten it to drop down to like the lower well where it wasn't impacting anything. But then when it started exhibiting some really weird behaviors after a driver update, I pulled the card and like heard the screw fall out. So I thought maybe the screw was contacting something and it had some stray voltage going on inside the GPU AIB. Well, those strange behaviors came back. Despite obviously there now not being a loose screw in the case. And I can only ascribe it to the Radeon drivers, which have just, proven themselves to have driven me absolutely batty right across the 5700 series and now the 6700 series as well. And it's always kind of root caused with the same initially indicative behavior, right? It's that warning that pops up that says, hey, your AMD Adrenalin application is not in sync with the drivers you are running. And I'm like, I haven't done anything to the drivers. Why is this thing out of sync? But on this box, it was really weird behavior where, the monitors wouldn't wake back up from sleep, and like the keyboard lighting wouldn't come back, and I wouldn't be able to get video back on the screen, so I'd have to hit the reset button, and sometimes it would start up, but like it wouldn't activate a monitor. Just really weird behavior. So I hit my threshold of dealing with it. I was like, it's either the GPU, the power supply, or the motherboard and processor. Small chance that it's the RAM. And I said, well, you got to make a pick, right? So I picked GPU. So I bought it's by Gigabyte, but I bought an NVIDIA RTX 3080 Ti this week and threw that in.
It's a significant purchase. It's
the highest end card I've ever bought. I typically don't go that high. I typically don't even buy the XX70 Ti variant. The XX70 is typically where I top out. But I have a few cards in a couple of the systems, and I was like, it doesn't make any sense for you to buy the exact same card again for testing and whatnot. So I tried that out. I gamed on it 3 nights, no problems. I feel like hopefully I've exercised the beast. So Vanguard performs, reasonably well. Again, I'm still tweaking graphic settings just because I don't like, it's not looking to me as good as Cold War did. So I'll continue kind of tweaking that, but overall,
you played a bunch of. Did you only play the story in World War II, WW2, or did you play any of the multiplayer? Because that's the same developer, right?
I only played the story, and yeah, that's a good point. Like Sledgehammer, to me, people sing the praises of Infinity Ward and who's the Black Ops guy? And Treyarch. But like that World War II campaign to me was like some of the greatest production value in voice acting. Like, you know, Josh Duhamel and, you know, some of the other actors in that like did a superb job. But back then I was just, I had not climbed back on board the multiplayer Call of Duty train. I was still in exile. So, but I got back on board with Black Ops Cold War, and really enjoyed that. The other thing that's tough for me with the paradigm is just I don't want to say the World War II era weapons. Like Cold War, I'm familiar with those weapons. I grew up with those weapons. I trained in and around those weapons. I'm familiar with those weapons and those attachments and kind of the things that they mimic. I am not familiar with like the World War II paradigm. It seems like a big dissonance right between me and that. And that's, you know, it doesn't. When I walked away from Cold War, I had it kind of in my head, you know, mentally what my loadouts were and what I was working on and what I was tweaking with and what I was going to try when I came back the next time. I don't have that same kind of fixation, right, with Vanguard. So, but you know, it's early days, so I'm checking it out. Hey, you want to talk a little bit of news?
Let's talk some news.
Okay, so we're going to set the stage with some of this other stuff. I'm not going to dive into it too much. I'm sure by now everybody knows that Xbox and Bethesda announced a second game showcase for the 14th. So they have their main showcase on Sunday, June 12th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Pacific Time. And then on Tuesday, at the same times, they have another showcase, which will include developer interviews, and it says deeper looks at the news from the Xbox and Bethesda Game Showcase. I think this is predominantly going to be a verbal presentation, and a lot of developer interviews, which we've talked in the past before. I personally like because you don't get to hear the developers talk directly a lot of the times. A lot of the times it's the marketing person or, you know, it's Phil Spencer or Sarah Bond. I mean, to me, it's important to hear from the creative director and the development lead, some of the lower level designers and things like that. So I actually look forward to those things. Not all gamers do. So my worry with this is that, you know, people are going to tune into it not having read the preliminary information of what it's supposed to be, just having read the headline. And then they're going to be disappointed that it's a bunch of talking, and then they're going to slag Microsoft. You know, and you know the showcase on Sunday and the developer interviews may not be that great. There may not be a lot of like production output out of that pipeline or the fall. But you know, when they tell you that it's going to be a bunch of developer interviews, I feel like it's on you if you tune in and you're disappointed. Were you any reaction to this news of a follow-on showcase? Happy, sad, glad to hear that it's going to happen?
I mean, I think what it sounds like to me then is that the showcase on Sunday is really going to be a traditional E3 stage show with a lot of clips, a little bit of conversation, but not any deep dives, right? And so I think it's nice that they have telegraphed this in such a way that they're going to hold some of those in-depth pieces for the second show and also hopefully set expectations as well. So no, I think it's good. You know, I will be, my excitement level will increase or decrease based on what's shown on Sunday. If I'm excited about stuff, I'll be eager to see what the next, you know, the follow-up show brings.
Yeah, what'll be interesting is if, you know, what Microsoft is really getting slagged for predominantly is the lack of gameplay that's been shown and the fact that a lot of the trailers are cinematic.
Well, we certainly had lots of those. Yeah.
Right. And so it would be nice if this were the developers talking you through gameplay footage. But we'll see. Other than that,
let's hit one more Microsoft story before we head into the announcements of today.
Go ahead.
Right. And I think that this came out yesterday, kind of officially came out during the news cycle today, but that the Game Pass streaming is coming to the current kind of models of Samsung TV, that the current models of Samsung TV are going to have a game center built in, which will include things like Stadia along with Game Pass. And so it is Bluetooth connectivity. We'll work with Xbox, PlayStation 4 and 5, and also Switch pro controllers as well in terms of the game. Doesn't have, the games don't have Rumble in them because it's streaming, but it moves away from what was initially thought of as their streaming stick and becomes just an app. Ideally, I would think that Microsoft's long-term play on this, I think this is smart of not selling a stick, but just having an app that's already built into things, having an app that can work on other sticks, having it be built into a Roku TV, getting it at multiple price points will be key. If the technology within kind of lower end TVs is going to be enough for this, or it needs to be the higher end OLED current model Samsungs.
Yeah, it's tough to tell how this is going to play. I mean, from my own personal consumer perspective, part of the problem is that with regard to the smart TVs, I've never been particularly happy with the way software updates are handled. I find particularly, in my experience with Samsung TVs, it is like stinking every time I turn the TV on, it needs a software update, right? And I have not felt that the syncopation between the overall TV operating system software update and the app software updates have necessarily been in sync, such that there's always, consistent stability in performance of the app and actually availability of the app. Sometimes you'll often get, weird software updates going on different drum beats, and then you'll just get an app that just won't run. The other thing is, Samsung TVs, like, I personally want to get rid of mine right now. I mean, it's the second wait, is it the second? I think it might be the second 4K TV that I bought, but it's my personal gaming TV. I don't have it upstairs, with the family. And it does a lot of very obnoxious kind of, I mean, this is interesting, kind of very Microsoft-y kind of oriented stuff where in the smart TV remote controller, it will just automatically decide that it's going to like do things in terms of synchronizing with the HDMI signal and taking you off into menus. And I'm like, I don't need you to like personally attach like control of this electronic device to your remote, right? I'm not using your remote to control my Xbox. Like, just display the video, be a dumb TV, and get out of my way. So it's a little worrisome that Samsung's a selected vendor from that perspective. But, we'll just have to see how it plays. All right, man, let's talk a little bit about Summer Games Fest. I'm going to let you maestro this one, if you don't mind, since the list I'm working from and the list you have in the agenda are slightly different, and we should find some good convergence points.
Good. Yeah, this list in the agenda is what I built along the way watching it today. Yep. So I will be, if I miss something, please jump in. So I'm really just going to kind of run down through these because I enjoyed the spectacle. I don't know that I walked out excited about anything. And I think that that's my challenge. I am more excited about things that I saw at the Devolver digital event than most anything at Summer Games Fest. But in terms of a show, I think Keeley put together a good show. I think the pacing of it was good. There was, there was some talking, but it was always very limited. Really, the most talking that ended up happening was at the end related to Last of Us, but they had a couple different announcements there. So let's get into that. Started with, or at least the first thing I saw was Callisto Protocol, which is a Dead Space-like game. It was also on Sony's State of Play last week, but you get some gameplay for it, and that's coming out in December this year. There was a Aliens game that got a teaser trailer, but isn't coming out until 23. Call of Duty got a pretty in-depth opening. Kind of Modern Warfare 2 they had their big reveal yesterday, and then today on Summer Games Fest they had some gameplay from one of the campaign missions, and so I thought it looked good. They talked a lot about their water tech. In some ways, I'm curious and interested to see what Warzone 2 looks like more than I am Modern Warfare 2. Not that I'm a huge Warzone player, but I think that idea of kind of evolving and moving from one battle royale into another, making an official numbered sequel to a battle royale game, right, is not something we've seen a lot of, and so it'll be an interesting move in how they move from one platform to another. But it does also make sense in terms of the technology that they're able to bring in, the AI that they were talking about yesterday, things like that.
Can I hold you up there?
Yeah, please do.
So I just want to jump in when you hit something that I actually care about, because I don't care about a ton of these titles. So just quickly, from the top, Callisto Protocol for me, not a big survival horror fan. Aliens Dark Descent. The problem with the Aliens Dark Descent is it was top down, right?
Because it's a strategy game developer doing it,
right? So we'll see how that goes. Modern Warfare 2. I don't know why we needed a 7.5 minutes of gameplay for the single player campaign that so many Call of Duty players never even bother playing. A neat way to display their tech, but kind of as you mentioned during Vanguard, it's another Call of Duty game, right? So I think a much shorter trailer would have been fine. Or if you want to do 7.5 minutes, show 7.5 minutes of multiplayer, right? Or
yeah, but that's a whole different press conference.
Right. So the interesting thing about the progression of the Warzone as a sequel, I think even though it's not Battle Royale, the closest thing I link it to, or I think about it in terms of, is Destiny, right? Whereas Destiny kind of gave us this impression that it was going to continue forever, but then after, a few years into the life cycle, they were like, hey, hold on, there's some reset button that we need to do where it's better to shift to a different, tech. One of the interesting things about Modern Warfare 2 and Warzone 2 is, and we've been bamboozled by this before, and I was, from a software developer perspective, I was very bothered by the way they did this integration before, where they were like, oh, we're combining everything and we're collapsing it. And I'm like, then why, when I hit a button in the launcher, does a separate app start, right? Supposedly this is going to be the first time that they're really combining and moving everything into a common engine. Now, again, I go back to, how are you doing that when you are bringing legacy games into it that aren't built right on your current version of your engine? Now, the Call of Duty engine still has old Quake code in it. So my point is, I don't know that I buy it. So,
well, and maybe for this year it might work because they're on parity, but 3 years down the road, we'll get back into the same situation, right?
Right. And I expect them kind of now that they're getting themselves into kind of this Microsoft lane, right? I expect them to bring the legacy stuff with them. So right now, today, at least in a common launcher, we've got Vanguard, Cold War, Modern Warfare, and Warzone. And
have you looked at your Vanguard launcher in the last day?
Well, what happened?
That Cold War is out of it. Now it is pre-order Modern Warfare 2, Warzone, and Vanguard.
Wow.
It's only 3.
No, that was just a couple of days ago, Cold War was in the launcher and now it's gone?
Yeah, which wow. I guess, only yesterday Modern Warfare 2 was announced. So when I booted up Vanguard last night, I only had 3 games showing up in that launcher.
Wow. So I wonder, I'll take a look at the Battle.net launcher now, because now I wonder, well, what happens if you try to install Cold War? Does it come back into the launcher? So point is that, right, there's a lot of jankiness, right, with this progression and like weird decisions that Activision makes that I don't fully track. And it makes it confusing from a consumer perspective because you don't know what product is really continuing to be supported. So, however, that all being said, we just talked through Vanguard. I'm excited to get back to modern weapons because, again, I'm in sync much more so with that paradigm. Let's leave the old weapons, trapped in Vanguard. And we'll see where this thing goes to from their discussion about this is the shift away. They haven't said a shift away from annualized installments, but they have said this is the shift to it's just a continuing game. That, to me, should mean the end of annualized installments, but it's interesting to see how they're going to play with it from here going forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, and because of the 3 studios, it'll be what does a continuing game really look like? Yeah. So then we get 4 sci-fi games, but I'm going to stop and talk about the last one. So we get a Flashback 2, which is a sequel to the 90s game. Then we get Fort Solis, sci-fi thriller with voice acting from Troy Baker and one of the lead voice actors of Red Dead. Routine, no gameplay, just kind of a teaser, kind of mood setting and then Stormgate. And Stormgate, it had just an opening cinematic, which definitely gave off some Blizzard vibes, which makes sense because this is a game by Frost Giant, which is former Warcraft, Starcraft, Command and Conquer devs, and it's a RTS. It's a free-to-play RTS. There's going to be a beta next year. No gameplay. One kind of screenshot. You know, it's very early, so it is. But at the same time, it's the most interest. I mean, I'm interested because I'm curious what that people with that legacy of game development, what they do with the RTS genre. Then Goat Simulator, Midnight Suns. So this is Marvel's Midnight Suns. It is not XCOM. But we didn't even get any card playing. So we did not get any gameplay. We got, pre-rendered scenes. And then a release of like 3 different collector's editions to purchase with different digital packages.
Right. In the release date you have on there, 10/7, that's a date that we already knew, right?
I believe so.
Okay. So I'm sorry.
I'm hesitant to say yes because it was moved from the spring and I think they targeted the fall. But yeah, I don't think it's a surprise that this is that.
Okay. So this is my next stopping point because I don't really have a dog in the fight for the other ones that went on before. The only thing this trailer did for me was convince me that I still don't know what in the flip that game is about. Like it's heading down the path of many of the comic book properties across multiple entertainment mediums that I have historically eschewed because it is following the kitchen sink protocol. It's now we've got Spider-Man in the game, and maybe to a certain degree I'm a classicist because I have been a comic book guy, but like this is not what the Marvel Sun storyline is. And of course I've mentioned before, look, I don't know why you need to apply the comic book label to a thing that is not the thing that the comic book was, when the argument is that you're applying it to that label so that the normals get interested. The normals don't know what the Marvel Suns were, right? So why call it that? Which
I think is why Spider-Man's in it, right? Like it is marketing based more than, it would be almost more interesting to have just a magic cast of characters.
Right. Or just reboot the Avengers games since you didn't really do great with that for your license like last time. Like, so we just have a lot of these characters that have no association with each other. They're apparently, at least we have an understanding storyline wise that what they're doing is they're fighting possessed or convinced to become evil for a short period of time other Marvel characters. We've got Venom in the game, which I just don't understand whatsoever. Hulk, it's all over the place. And
like you said, it's really this trailer is a kitchen sink, right?
Yeah.
To spend time with Venom and then to like tease the Hulk. I don't know.
And so what? As you defeat each of these characters, I assume that each of these characters, which were kind of they kind of walked onto the screen as if they were the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Which again, very similar in the way it played out to the Apocalypse, like storyline and imagery associated with the X-Men movie. Are they going to become good? Are you going to have access, gain access to them one by one, right, as player characters to recruit into your own thing? Spider-Man's in a black suit that I don't recall ever seeing that is sort of symbiote looking, but it's not that. Like, and my problem, from an IP perspective is, and this is a little more comic booky than video game, is I love the original cast of characters, minus the Avengers character, like the true Marvel Sons. I love that cast of characters because it gives them exposure, right, to people who have at least garnered a little bit of an interest in the Marvel universe, and it's an opportunity. It would be an opportunity for them to shine, right, to be on the stage themselves. But they're going to bury them by having Iron Man, Captain America, and now Spider-Man, Wolverine, and now Spider-Man in the game. And like, I just don't get it, right?
I'm the characters, the more interesting Ghost Rider, having Magic as a playable character, who's always been an interesting character in the X-Men, those are interesting casting. Back to your costume piece, that none of them are in any type of recognizable costumes intentionally. because if you want to buy the $80 version or the $100 version, there are X-Force skins. There are, you get all the different, you get 5 different skins in the $80 version. You get, in the $70 version. And you get, in the $100 version, you get 11 different skins. This is where the DLC is going to come. So if you want your comic book recognizable skin, you're going to pay.
There's one thing about this game that is transparent and very clear in its intentionality, and that is that it is a 2K game. To the nines, right? Like it's unmistakable about the money grubbing sheen that it has around it. And I guess I'm assuming that Doctor Strange is in the game because there was a splash screen thereafter that there's a skin for him in there as well, which means he must show up in the game at some point, I guess.
Which makes sense. I mean, if it's a magic based piece, yeah, we haven't seen him yet, but it certainly makes sense. All right, let's keep on moving. Neon White, which I played a demo of earlier this year. It's out next week. It's first person with a little bit of card based for some of your abilities. Very kind of anime over the top, really kind of fluid and fun from the demo I played. It's out on Switch and PC. Steam's got their Next Fest coming this weekend, so you should be able to get some of these demos to try it out. Midnight Fight Express is a game made by one person. I got kind of Hotline Miami, John Wick Hex vibes to it in terms of that top down. Then we get some free to play games. So we get Star Rail, sci-fi anime, lots of sci-fi, and then Zoneless Zone Zero, which is by the developers of Genshin Impact. So think Genshin Impact, but in kind of a sci-fi kind of apocalyptic setting versus fantasy. TMT Shredder's Revenge, we get a release date, which was news in terms of next week, June 16th, and also one final news piece there of Casey Jones being playable, so that adds not only the 4 turtles, but then Splinter and Casey Jones. Interesting that Humankind is coming to Game Pass and console in August, so that's the kind of strategy, large Civ-like strategy game. Warhammer 40k Darktide by the makers of Vermintide, so you kind of know what you're getting there. Layers of Fear by Blooper Team. Blooper Team has done The Medium most recently, coming out in early 23. Definitely kind of horror, kind of psychological horror piece. Gotham Knights, we get some Nightwing gameplay here. They've had some gameplay reveals before. We knew about the date coming on October 25th. And then we head into Last of Us.
So I want to talk a little bit about Gotham Knights. So
please, yes, because I do too.
A lot of poo-pooing that's gone on about this game. And I guess this is another thing, and I mean, and this would definitely be bias, as I spoke at length today on Twitter about the difference between criticism and bias. This would be valid bias, and that just, again, as a comic book guy, I've always found this storyline super interesting from the very beginning. I guess what we saw was a weird intermix of both gameplay and kind of cinematics. So it was a little difficult to tell exactly where that was transitioning. What I feel like I saw from gameplay, though, is it presents the interesting premise that there would be of having 4 martial arts characters, each with different styles. And if you're able to put that effectively in a game like this, I think that's a big plus. Part of the problem with games like this is historically what you always get to where the characters, the differentiation in the style of the characters winds up feeling very diluted, right? And they all kind of feel very samey. That so far doesn't seem like what I'm seeing. I see a very, the bits where we saw Batgirl in it, I felt like I saw very distinctive differences in like the fighting style, which, comic book creators have tried to, right, create the effect of in the comic books. To me, it would be super interesting to play like a Dick Grayson and to kind of follow that progression from, being Batman's first protege to, in a future of Gotham where there is no Batman. But where these 4 proteges stay around and they're all, distinct differences in personality, in background story, and martial arts approaches. So what I saw, I felt was interesting. How about you?
Oh, I've been interested in this game since day one, and part is the property. I always enjoy, for as much as I love the Batman Gotham kind of universe, I will always, I always enjoy the side characters more than Bruce Wayne. Right, like I find Jason Todd and Tim Drake and Barbara Gordon and Stephanie and all Cassandra, and Dick Grayson, all and even Damian, all more interesting as characters, in part because Bruce Wayne has to be so untouchable and stoic and static because of being Batman, right? It's the same reason that Superman's son is more interesting than Superman, because writers can do more with them.
Right.
So
all these characters get to become foils of what has become an archetype within the DC universe. So yeah.
Yeah. No. So I enjoyed the kind of side missions in Arkham Knight where you played as Jason Todd, where you played as Nightwing, where you played as Barbara Gordon. Those, they weren't drastically different in their style because it was still using that same engine. So having the ability of taking those characters, putting them in kind of the Arkham combat, but then mixing in different styles, I'm very interested in this game.
Yeah, and I guess what we saw, I'm just realizing now, I saw him go through the costume changes and the hairstyle changes, which I'm guessing there will be some degree of kind of character creator, I think, or maybe that's just progression.
Or unlocks, or yeah.
So
Battle Pass, who knows?
What was super interesting is I realized now, I thought the last suit that we saw him in was his Injustice suit, but I'm realizing now that I believe that's his Metal suit from DC Metal.
Oh, yeah.
Which was the Capullo, Scott Snyder thing that he did after he rolled off the main book.
Yep.
So yeah, it's just super interesting. And you bring up another good point that this is the opportunity. I cannot remember what the title of that Batman comic was that I don't remember if it was New 52 or post New 52, but it was when they were trying to do the titles where they were putting them out, every week, and you had that cast of characters that was Tim Drake, Cassandra, Nobody, and some of those other additional side characters. So it was the old side characters, but then a new cast of side characters as well. Yeah, chance to be super interesting. I want to go back to did you mention Metal Hellslinger?
No, I skipped over that. Oh, I did. Yeah. Skipped over One Piece and Nightingale, which is a roguelike. And yeah, so if you want to talk about Metal Hellslinger, go for it.
Yeah, just real quick blurb. Because I own my own failure in this, right? Because there was another rhythm-based first-person shooter game that I think came out this year or last year.
It was last year, yeah.
Yeah, that I was also super interested in, but admittedly never made the time to go actually play it. Same thing. This feels super interesting. Looks great. I love the heavy metal theme, and especially I'm going to out myself a little bit here for some Nickelback oriented shade that I will get thrown. I actually like Evanescence and Amy Lee, and I definitely heard her voice on the soundtrack in this game. So. But
cool. The soundtrack, I appreciate what it's doing, and you could tell through the trailer that it is the reloads, the firing hits that beat.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's lovely in that it's a very intentional, deliberate style of game design, right, in a particular vector. So I appreciate that. So it'll be interesting if I clear up room in my schedule to get over and play it.
All right, let's end with the way they did with Last of Us. We got Last of Us Part 2 multiplayer being a standalone piece. We got a little bit of information on the HBO Max series, and then we get Last of Us Part 1 remastered. And not remastered, which already came out on PlayStation 4, but built from the ground PC and PlayStation 5 remake. So taking the original voice acting, the original motion capture, and kind of using technology to put it into a new engine. And that's coming a lot sooner than I expected, coming the beginning of September 2nd. And then they said shortly thereafter on PC. So at one point, this was rumored last year, a year or two ago, that Sony Bend might be the ones making this. There's no mention of Sony Ben, so Naughty Dog definitely talked about it like it was their project. So we'll see. Didn't see, the list of developers in the trailer yet. So that's something I want to keep an eye out for.
So no mention of Sony Ben supporting this. So basically, the Sony Ben hoopla this week was literally just about them revealing a new logo.
Maybe, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, it's also very possible that it shows up, just like any other Call of Duty, that it's one of the multiple studios that ends up getting listed in the opening sequence. Right. So,
before you go on to Devolver Digital, I just want to mention, because I don't know if Saints Row Boss Factory and ability.
Oh yeah, yep. I skipped that. Yep.
Coming out for you to roll, make a character before the game actually drops.
And this they've done since Saints Row 3, that you could. Okay. On PC, you could, go in and create your character previous to the game.
Right. I think the biggest thing that I want to mention is Witchfire, which was a first-person shooter that is looks kind of like a weird mix, I would say, between Doom Eternal and Tiny Tina's Wonderland. It kind of is in that direction of Doom Eternal kind of graphical style, but then it combines with it kind of Bioshocky, Tiny Tina's, right, magical approach of a secondary weapon in your other hand. And I have to say, quite honestly, the only game that I saw today that was actually graphically impressive to me, I need to watch The Last of Us remastered trailer again. Maybe I was looking at it at a bad angle on a monitor or on a bad monitor, but it just didn't light a fire for me. As far as the tech that was being applied to make that a remake. And that may be a matter of, while I'm not a super fan of old movies, or taking an old game, if you're going to bring it into the now, kind of leaving it in the same trappings of its original graphical style. But this may be because there's an argument that this game is a game that doesn't need to be remade, given how short ago it was made in the first place and remastered. This may be a matter of where, layering more modern graphical techniques on top of a game that is so recent in memory doesn't work creatively. But we'll see. I'll go back and look at the trailer again, but I think
it looked solid. I don't know that it looked drastically different than other PlayStation 5 games at this point.
Right. But that was the main thing I wanted to mention. Witchfire looked actually impressive to me. And also Warframe getting a new open world expansion. Not until next year. What was most interesting to me from The Last of Us reveal was the mention of the multiplayer, which is the thing I'm more interested in. Unfortunately, the most we got about a release date for that was that we would get more news about that in 2023, which is
That's a pretty long stretch of time. Yeah. Yep. Which really makes sense why it's going to be its own standalone piece, because, we're already 2 years out from Last of Us Part 2.
Well, I'm sure Jim Ryan wasn't having any discussion of not releasing anything until 2023. So
fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to see what else is on Sony's slate for the fall. Now that we know this, is this? Yeah, and how much of this was fast tracked in order to make up for things that got delayed? We will see when we find out a date about God of War, I suppose. So I'm just going to go quick through 4 games that were announced at Devolver Digital, because I am more excited about 3 of these than most of the stuff that we just talked about. Angry Foot it almost looks like it's kind of cartoony first-person shooter, but it is almost like a room clearing. It reminded me of the game Rico, where you're kind of moving from room to room, clearing out rooms, but you're breaking down doors with your foot, you're kicking enemies with your foot, you have a gun, you have weapons, but you also have super powerful feet. And so it is this kind of fast-paced, frenetic, almost like a cartoony Super Hot to some degree as well, without the stop aspects of Super Hot. The game that I'm most excited for today is Plucky Squire. Plucky Squire is this really kind of cute 2D cartoony storybook type of piece where the character comes out of the 2D and comes into a 3D, makes it a 3D platformer, but it's moving back and forth, almost like Link Between Worlds aspects of a 2D plane and a 3D plane. Then you get Cult of Lamb, which is kind of Binding of Isaac's survival with some cult simulator aspects into it, that you've got a group to recruit members and to kind of a management sim piece on top of that. And aesthetically, the game that excites me is Skate Story. It is simply just a skateboarding game, but you're a demon made of glass. It's a very stylistic skateboarding game that you are a polygonal character, and instead of having a human-like, it's a human form, but it's all angles of glass. And so when you crash, you shatter apart, but it also means that it's a very stylized world. Everything's in kind of silhouette as it's moving through, with a great soundtrack, or at least a soundtrack that kind of had both a chill vibe and kind of a driving beat to it. So kind of a cool game coming out, but only Cult of Lamb is coming out this year. The other 3 are coming out in 2023.
All right, folks, and that's our Summer Fest wrap up. Do you want to talk quickly about your experience most recent experience in Soundfall for the PlayStation 5?
Sure. Yeah, I'll talk about that in part because it ties in nicely with Hellsinger, and also that I suppose I could talk about the amount of time that I'm playing Diablo Immortal with a level 49 character and Battle Pass. Okay. So
I was listening to last week's episode, and I distinctly remember that last week you were at level 23-ish, I want to say. 24, 27, okay. Somewhere in there. So you basically doubled it in a week's time?
The grind gets much harder, yes. Okay. Right? I mean, but that was level 20-something in a day because the grind really slows down around 35. It slows even further. It is all the things that I talked about last week have been kind of playing out in terms of it really is about the legendary gems and the sockets of that, socketing those, because those legendary gems only have 5 tiers of rarity of, it's pretty, you can get a 1 tier, you can get a 2 tier when you have a legendary crest, which you get through a battle pass or purchasing them. And even in the battle pass, even in the paid version of the battle pass, I think you only get, of the 40 levels, there's only maybe 3 or 4 levels that give you a legendary crest, which guarantees a legendary gem when you run through. But even in the guarantee of that legendary gem, it's a 1 or 2 level. If you stack your crests, you might get a higher level, and then you're still in RNG. This is where this game is an incredibly fun Diablo game if you're not trying to min-max. And if you're trying to min-max, it is a cash grab. And all the complaints about it that have been online over the last week are accurate. That there is a lot going on in terms of gating, in terms of RNG, in terms of pay to win. And again, you can get through the story, and enjoy that and delete the 12 gigs off your system and probably be just fine. It's enjoyable. The open world is fun to run around, kind of very much in like a Destiny way, that I find myself kind of randomly grouping up with people as we're clearing out bounties. Same that you would do in a public area in Destiny. It does gate some things. That I saw an article where some of the drops are gated or eliminated after you beat a certain number of hard enemies, like the purple or a yellow enemy in the open world. If you beat 4 or 5 within a day, you no longer get kind of high level drops for it. And I've run into that as well. I guess that shows you how much I've been playing. But so yes, I am enjoying it in short bursts or in really long bursts, but I also see the faults of it and really see how hollow it's how hollow the Diablo model can be, right? It's enjoyable, but it is just, it's a hamster wheel of numbers going up and colors changing.
It's a Geedunk machine. Like
Yeah.
it's a thing you walk up to, chuck some quarters in, get a candy bar out of it, right? And that becomes much more. I think what you're conveying is that becomes much more transparent on how egregious that can be when you paywall a lot of stuff. It's not as the looter shooter model is fine maybe when you pay your $60 and you get access to everything, and then it's just a matter of wading through combat and showing some proficiency. But when things are incrementally paywalled along the way, it can feel very, very punishing.
Yes, well said. Punishing enough that I've installed Diablo 3, just as a point of comparison. So I also played some Soundfall, which is relevant to this because Soundfall plays out like a Diablo rhythm game. That it's an action RPG, kind of the same Diablo perspective. There's gear and loot and rarities to all that, but the real distinctiveness is that you are firing, blocking, moving, not necessarily moving like as you're running around, but dashing to the beat. And so you've got a little pulse meter coming across your screen, and if you're shooting on the beat, you get a more powerful shot. If you miss the beat, your shot diminishes. If you miss the beat consecutively, you need to reload. And so it really rewards this, it kind of gives this driving rhythm piece. I'm playing it on a PlayStation 5, which means that my DualSense is pulsing around with me as the beat goes. And so it's enjoyable. I mean, that is, as somebody who enjoys the Diablo-like gameplay, it's nice that this is doing something a little different with it. It's not super deep. This is pretty much its mechanic. It's Diablo with a rhythm game. And considering I'm playing Diablo with a, giant slot machine, I might as well play some other aspects of that game as well. And so Soundfall was something that came out a couple weeks ago, and I had a chance to pick it up, and I finally got a chance to play it as I was looking for scratching that Diablo itch without feeling like I'm running into a 400% best offer deal on Diablo Immortal. So that's my gameplay experience this week. Looks like yours has been a little more Halo.
Yeah, so I've been continuing to dig away at Halo Infinite Season 2. Look, guys, you guys out there playing, like, you need to watch the original Top Gun, because the rules of Top Gun, the flight safety rules, are in place for the safety of you and your crew. They are neither, they're not flexible, neither am I. You guys need to stick together. The season is called Lone Wolves. You shouldn't be taking that literally. And so I go
leaving their wingman. Oh no!
Exactly. I go into these matches, and I mean, where I am now, I guess in skill progression is, I mentioned this last week, but the matches continue to be much sweatier than they were in my initial outing. So I can only think that I'm being grouped with higher skilled or more experienced players, whatever. So I'm going into these super sweaty matches, which are very close to ranked matches. I started playing ranked this week, by the way. I'm not going to play a ton of ranked, because that is, look, you need to put the coffee down, right? Put a sweatband on, right? And just get ready to drip, because you're going to work for a full 12 minutes. And I feel like if I play one ranked match a night and I get a victory, then I'm just going to stop. So I played my first ranked match. It was a land grab match. We won. It was a shellacking, like 11-1. So, yay, I'm all for that. But I go into these regular matches, and like, everybody's off on different corners of the map on my team. And I'm like, I walked out of one match with like a high 30s in accuracy and no assists. And I'm like, look, guys, that tells me that I'm firing fine using controller, but none of you guys were near me. So I had nobody putting fire down on the same target. So, that's the story of this week. I've had a lot of fun. I'm at Battle Pass level like 73 now. I have, because I didn't really play it that much in Season 1, and because you can continue your progression in follow-on seasons, and because the season is 6 months, so I feel like I'll have plenty of time. I have insisted, I guess because of my OCD, on trudging through the Season 1 Battle Pass, and then I'll flip over to the Season 2 Battle Pass. During the land grab event, I did progress through that, so I did get access to, I can't remember the armor set that you, it's not the Rakshasa armor, it's the Eagle Strike. So I did get access to the Eagle Strike armor. Unfortunately, I unlocked that and a couple other little nits beyond that before the event ended. So the way these events work is they're actually only live for like a week at a time, and then you can't progress in them any further, and then they'll go live again. I think the next time this one will be live will be mid-June, so I want to say like June 14th. I don't know. I'm sure other people know who played hard in season 1. I don't know if it will be yet another land grab event or it'll be some other kind of event. But I've been having fun. I love, again, how it plays on the battlefield. I'm really... Yeah, go ahead.
So is Vanguard going to pull you away from Halo, or are you scheduling things out that you're touching both here at this point?
I'm scheduling things out. This week I am going to take a break. I am going to play a lot more Vanguard, just to kind of... Because I kind of played Halo Infinite as my primary and Vanguard as my secondary, and my perspective on Vanguard might be skewed a little because it's a thing that I've been trying to squeeze in. So I'm going to give myself room to breathe in Vanguard, start playing some other modes in Vanguard. I've only been playing free-for-all and just started a little bit of team deathmatch in Vanguard. So I want to get around to playing some of the other modes. I'm also going to play some Left 4 Dead 2 this week. So give myself a little break. I say I'm going to give myself a little break from Halo Infinite, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, you're still going to fit some matches.
Yeah, right.
Get at least 5 for your XP, right?
Yes, right. I'm going to dispense talking about Next Picks Plays because we'll have plenty of time to talk about that, and we've talked about an awful lot tonight. Anything else that you want to go over, DBQ?
No, we covered a lot, but we've got a lot more to cover in the next couple of days as announcements keep coming.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, everybody, for joining in. We certainly appreciate it. We appreciate anybody who happened to roll through and watch the live stream. For those out there who watch the archive version of this video on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube, we appreciate you as well. Please take care of yourselves. Stay safe out there. Play the games that you like. Come here to talk about the games that you love. Once again, my name has been Game Logic from the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube. Here with my co-host, DBQ Hams. Until next time, good night, good luck, and good gaming. That's going to do it for us. We're out of here.
Abukate